go back to the days of the old Southwest Conference when it was all Texas and Arkansas. I mean, do that. I'm good with that.
Greetings and salutations, and welcome to the Odd Coaches Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Keith Adams, and with me today on this Throwdown Thursday edition is our favorite administrator, Robert Abney. Robert, how you doing today as we get ready for March Madness in about 4 weeks?
And I am living the dream. We are into February. Games start not that games haven't mattered all year, but it becomes a lot more apparent now who's got to win on what night, just to keep the dream alive. So let's bring it, man. Let's go.
Yeah, I love that because that win in November or that loss in November matters just as much as that win or loss in February. So in segment one, we'll do the men's game. In segment two, we'll do the women's game. And in segment three, there's some administrative issues that we're going to jump in at a high level. But first, men's net rankings as of this taping. Houston's 1, Purdue's 2, Arizona's 3, UConn's 4, Tennessee's 5, BYU is 6, Alabama 7, Auburn 8, North Carolina's 9, and Iowa State's 10. And Robert, as you see, I put in the AP rankings next to the net rankings. Anything catch your eye?
Well, let's see. Houston, okay, so we're taping on Sunday morning. Houston lost last night.
Badly.
Arizona lost last week. BYU lost last week. Iowa State lost last night. Kansas, who beat Houston, isn't in there.
And don't forget UNC lost to Georgia Tech before they beat Duke.
And UNC lost. And yeah, who do you trust?
Nobody, because everybody's good and everybody's bad. And I'm going to Phoenix with 0.5 for the Final Four this year, making my triumphant return. Go Lopes. And I have no idea who's going, man. And I anticipate a lot of bid stealers. I anticipate a lot of top teams and conferences losing in their conference tournament and taking away bids from the favorites that the fans look for. Because, Robert, there's only 3 teams on extended winning streaks, and that's 10 games or more as of this taping. And that's Richmond, High Point, shout out to Akiak, and McNeese. Those are the only teams on extended winning streaks.
And none of those 3 will make the tournament if they don't win their conference tournament.
Exactly. So should be interesting. But Robert, our story of the week. Football has ruined basketball, and it doesn't care. Basketball has and always will be the little brother to football. The original Big East broke up due to football. UConn was even in the American Conference because of football, and we now have West Coast schools and primarily East and Midwest conferences playing each other because of football. SMU, Cal, Stanford, they're all in the ACC beginning next year because of football, and the majority of schools lose money. Reverb from that, starting next season, the bottom 3 teams in the Big Ten won't even make the tournament, so how many of those coaches are going to get fired next year? And finally, before I get your thoughts, the Big Ten and the SEC have formed a joint advisory group of university presidents, chancellors, and athletic directors to address, quote, the significant challenges facing college athletics. Robert, what do we have going on, man? What are your thoughts to all of this happening right in front of our eyes?
Well, first of all, I mean, I'm a get off my lawn guy. I mean, I'm like, go back to the days of the old Southwest Conference when it was all Texas and Arkansas. I mean, do that. I'm good with that. I mean the moves, the conference realignments. I don't think anybody really knows what the long-term consequences of those are going to be. this conversation between the Big 12 and the SEC, I mean, all they're really talking about is, how are we maximizing our revenue? That's it. It has no conversations about, is any of this a good idea? There's none of that. And long-term consequences. I mean, you're gonna have schools start to cut. I think you're gonna see schools starting to cut Olympic sports because for the vast majority of schools, it's just not sustainable for them to try to run full athletic programs. And each of the NCAA divisions has sport requirements. To be NCAA Division III, you have to have X number of sports. Division II, you have to have X number of sports. And I mean, the long term, I have thought, and I still think that at some point, everybody's just going to say, football, go do your thing. And everything else, basketball and everything else is going to do something else. Because it makes no sense for Cal to play in the ACC. None. Not any. Zero.
Yeah.
And for a school that already has financial issues, this ain't going to make it better. And with the academic restrictions that Cal has, it's not like they can just say, oh, well, let's let in more kids to get more student revenue or anything. Because, I mean, I was at a high school that had, I mean, there was one year we had something like 100, we had 250 graduates, and 75 of them graduated with higher than a 4.0 grade point. No, it wasn't 75. It was like 50 of them had higher than a 4.0 grade point average and had AP course credit already in hand, ready to go. And I can't tell you how many of our kids applied to Cal, A, applied, and B, couldn't get in. And no, they were not athletes, but
couldn't get in.
What are you going to do? That's so this whole thing, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I have not believed and will continue to believe that it's not going to turn out well.
Yeah. So the Big Ten and the SEC have a working relationship. They're the two largest and the two wealthiest conferences. The commissioners have real power, and the advisory group was formed in reaction to, quote, recent court decisions, pending litigation, a patchwork of state laws, and complex governing proposals. And that was according to the Big Ten press release. So fans, we are going to watch this closely. And when you have the money, you have power to make whatever decisions you want. And because the NCAA is waiting for Congress to save them, Robert, they might just say, we'll do this ourselves and thank you. So when we get back in segment 2, we're going to talk about the women's game. We'll be right back on the iCoaches podcast.
Why should student athletes use the CKA SAVE Project academic and athletic consulting services? Over the past 15 to 20 years, colleges, universities, professional sports teams, business organizations, and others have increased their use of consulting services to improve their decision-making processes and results. Over the same time, the athletic and academic landscape has changed for high school and college student athletes as the NCAA has raised initial academic eligibility requirements for student athletes while decreasing the number of transfer restrictions. Former college student athletes have noted that they were academic and athletically unprepared for the rigors of college. Let the CKA SAVE Project's close to 30 years of academic and athletic experience help guide student athletes to increase success as we work to help student athletes achieve the goal of obtaining a college degree. For more information, contact Dr. Keith Adams by email at cka@ckasaveproject.org.
Welcome back to the Odd Coaches Podcast in segment 2. Let's jump to the women's net rankings. South Carolina's 1, Stanford's 2, UConn's 3, Texas is 4, Iowa's 5, Utah's 6, UCLA is 7, Notre Dame is 8, Kansas State is 9, and North Carolina State is 10. And just like the men's net rankings, Robert, I put the AP rankings next to them. Anything catch your eye, sir?
Well, I know that USC beat Stanford this past week at Stanford. Shout out to Will Cotton because he ain't here. But his girl Juju Watkins dropped 51.
Dropped the 50 piece.
Yep. And Texas appears to have figured things out a little bit. They, without Rory Harmon, they went to Baylor on I think it was Wednesday night, but they went to Baylor this week and handled Baylor pretty easily, actually. So they're starting to sort stuff out. Utah is really good. I like watching that the Peely girl. She's a handful. She's going to be tough for people to guard down the stretch. But I mean, like you talk about, the women's game is chalk right now.
It's going to be hard to get into the tournament. It's going to be hard.
It's South Carolina, Stanford, UConn, and Iowa, basically, until somebody convinces me differently.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to get a tournament. If you're a mid-major team, good luck. Iowa just came to town, and the Xfinity Center was sold out. Maryland made a gallant effort, but it's just going to be tough. And unlike the men's side, there's a lot of extended winning streaks on the women's side. Florida Gulf Coast, and we're talking about 10 games or more. Princeton, Fairfield, Ball State, Southern Indiana, South Carolina, South Dakota State. They're sneaking back in there, Robert. South Dakota State, Marshall, and Gonzaga. I still
think, looking at those names, aside from South Carolina, maybe Gonzaga, maybe. If those teams don't win their tournaments, they're not getting in.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really hard because the power conferences, especially the Big Ten, they're going to take 6, 7, 8 spots. Ain't but 68. Okay. SEC is going to take 6, 7 spots because that's who's in the net. Pac-12 is going to take 5, 6, 7 slots. So it's going to be really, really hard. But as you mentioned, Robert, story of the week, go Juju, go Juju, go. Most points in USC history, second most points in Pac-12 history, trailing only Kelsey Plum. 40 points through 3 quarters, breaking USC freshman record set by Cheryl Miller. And anytime you break a record from Cheryl Miller, I'm old enough to know Cheryl Miller's the greatest thing on 2 feet. Cheryl Miller probably put up 20 now. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So again, go Juju. I hope USC makes a tournament so a national audience can kind of see her in a captive setting. I know Will's been a big fan all year. And, again, I do hope USC does make a tournament, but it's going to be very, very hard.
Don't think that Caitlin Clark did not see that. Don't think she didn't see that.
And she can get on the run.
And I could see that happening. I think I could see her saying, "Oh, that's the only 50-point game this year." Hang on just for 1 second.
Yes, I love that.
Let me get back to you.
Finally, in the women's game, another team, Robert. Central Michigan's women's basketball team must forfeit its game against Kent State because it doesn't have enough available student athletes. the game will not be rescheduled. Per MAC rules, Kent State will be awarded the win. Central Michigan gets a loss in the conference standing. The overall records will not be affected. The MAC did not provide a specific reason of why Central Michigan was low on players. The Chippewas are 5-14, only had 7 active players last week against Miami, and finished a 64-59 win with 6 when sophomore guard Taylor Anderson injured her foot. What's going on, Robert? Why are we having these problems in the women's game?
I again, the women get 15 scholarships. And I mean, when my niece was at Sacramento State, which is they're in the Big Sky, I think.
So that's like, or whatever.
That's Big Sky. So that's like you want to rank all the D1 conferences, the Big Sky, if they're not at the bottom, they're second from the bottom.
Let's just say they're a one bid conference.
They are a one bid conference, and that one bid is going to be a 15 seed at best, right? And they never had an issue having enough players play games. They had 15 people on scholarship. They had 2 or 3 walk-ons, never had an issue. So when I see stuff, I mean, I just wonder I always wonder what's going on behind the scenes. If there's some coaching stuff, if there's some culture stuff, I don't know. I don't know. There is definitely something, though. There's a story there.
Well, we've had a Power 5 school have this issue, and we've had a one bid conference school have this issue. This is not good. So let's do better, as we like to say in the school system. Let's just do better. And with that, when we get right back on the Odd Coaches podcast, we're going to talk money. And I'm glad I have my administrator here. We'll be right back on the Odd Coaches podcast.
The reviews are in for Dr. Keith Adams' book, Finding the Balance, My Personal Journey to Academic and Athletic Success. College professor and student athlete academic expert Dr. Lisa Rubin said, "There is nothing out there like this book, so I do hope people will pay attention and give it a read." Former George Mason standout Fowler Campbell said, "Consider this book an opportunity to work directly with Dr. Adams, just like I did. I assure you that there will be something you can take away that will be useful to you throughout your personal journey." Ryan Waite, a recent college graduate who is a software engineer, said, "I like how the book is based on research, which makes it good for general students as well as student athletes." The book serves as both a memoir to Dr. Adams' 30-year academic and athletic career, as well as an instructional guide to assist student athletes, parents, coaches, teachers, and administrators navigate through the challenges of finding a better balance between academic and athletic success. The book includes over 15 personal stories and anecdotes from Dr. Adams, along with numerous former players and colleagues from a variety of sports and endeavors. You can order your copy at www.ckasaveproject.org. From the main page, simply click CKA Save Project Services and order the Find the Balance book. For more information, contact Dr. Keith Adams by email at cka@ckasaveproject.org.
Welcome back to the Odd Coaches podcast in segment 3. And again, I'm glad I have my administrator with me. NCAA revenue has been released. The NCAA generated nearly $1.3 billion with a B dollars in revenue for the 2022-2023 fiscal year, more than half of which was distributed back to Division I members, according to financial statements released last week. The NCAA revenue rose $1.14 billion in the previous financial year to $1.28 billion. And as usual, the bulk of NCAA revenue, $945 million, came from the media rights and the marketing deals tied to March Madness. The NCAA's deal with CBS and Warner Brothers actually accounts for $900 million annually. And always remember, the NCAA has no direct involvement in the operation of top-tier Division I football, known as the Football Bowl subdivision in the college football playoffs, and that brings in $470 million annually to the conferences that participate. So what does the future hold? The NCAA is facing at least 5 5 antitrust lawsuits, which challenge rules and regulations regarding recruiting, athlete transfer, and compensation for athletes. You got House versus the NCAA, was recently class certified and could put the NCAA on the hook for a potential multi-billion-dollar payout. So oftentimes I look at Jay Billis's X or Twitter account, and he said it's easy. Sign the players to contracts. Contracts can include buyouts and employment conditions. It works for the rest of the free world. Pressure is mounting because the NCAA violates antitrust laws. Here's a thought: stop doing that. Robert, you have dealt with budgets. You have lived in this world. What are your thoughts on the release of the NCAA revenue, and what advice would you give them?
I mean, first of all, they make a whole lot of money. They disperse a lot of money to the schools, which to many of those schools, that's the only thing keeping them solvent. And now some of these schools are traveling ridiculous. They're spending ridiculous amounts of money on travel because of conference realignments, because of football, which is something they don't control. And they're getting sued because they can't figure out their rules.
And don't forget Title IX.
It almost goes without saying that the NCAA has a problem here. And because if they have to settle lawsuits or pay out in lawsuits, the only choice they have is to take the revenue that they're making from these tournaments and reducing payouts to schools to settle legal claims. That's really their only choice. So when that happens, and you don't have all this, you don't have $669 million being distributed to schools, what is going to happen to those schools? Mm-hmm. How are they going to continue to run their programs? Are they going to continue to run their programs? Not good, man.
So what I've always wanted to know, and we were together when I was doing my research. If you work in the bookstore 20 hours a week, you get a contract, you get a salary, you get your tuition remission, whatever you get. I've always wondered why they didn't just do that with athletics. You work for schools 20 to 30 hours a week. When you travel, you have the school's name on you. So it always baffled me that they went away from that when they had the opportunity to make the change. Now that everybody can make coin, and again, get the bag, do whatever you want, but please get a degree at the end of the rainbow, because it's going to help you long after your jump shot or you stop catching passes. This is a lot of money, and the football money they never have gotten in the first place. And as you said, a lot of schools bank on this. So now take a school like Maryland, who's going to get Big Ten money, a lot of construction going on, as I talk about a lot. But what are we going to get out of this? So I'm always curious when people start talking about the money, because the NCAA, they're a small, dedicated group of people who aren't making a lot of money in the corporate office in Indianapolis, because all of this money is being facilitated out. So this is just a mess. And I don't know how they're going to survive if they lose the court case. So that's, kind of what I'm thinking about is,
and every indication is not if they lose the court case, it's when.
Yeah. And I've always wondered why they even with the transfers, if you just added an academic component, yes, you have freedom of movement if you're in good academic standing and you're meeting measurable, air quote, progress to graduation. I think that could slow down some of the knee trigger decisions to move back and forth because we're in the school business. At the end of the day, we're in the school business. And pro football needs to change their rule so people can leave early. Basketball needs to change their rules, but there's multiple pathways to be professionals because some kids, they don't want to be in college. And I'm not mad at them, but they're taking advantage of whatever opportunity, as you should.
Mm-hmm.
But man, this is going around in circles, and the kids are not going to benefit from this because I don't like the advice they're giving. Thus, CKA's trying to, assist as much as they can. But any final thoughts before we wrap up on this mess? Because you see that there's money there, but how is the money being used?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And when these lawsuits come to bear, what is anybody thinking about the consequences? Are the schools thinking about the consequences?
Yes.
I would submit that currently they are not.
No, because they're putting money into the stadium and not into the library. All right. So on behalf of our favorite administrator, Robert Abney, I'm Dr. Keith Adams saying thank you for listening and or watching the Odd Coaches podcast. And we will see you on the sidelines. Till next time, take care.
The Odd Coaches podcast is sponsored by the CKA Save Project. The CKA Save Project is an industry leader in providing student-athlete academic and athletic support. From assessing student-athletes' academic and athletic skills, to measuring and monitoring student-athlete academic progress, to improving student-athlete time management and organizational skills, the CKA Save Project provides wraparound services for student-athletes from middle school through college. For more information, visit us on the web at www.ckasaveproject.org or schedule a free consultation with Dr. Keith Adams by emailing cka@ckasaveproject.org. We hope you enjoyed today's show. The Odd Coaches podcast drops new episodes every Tuesday through Friday on most weeks. Make sure you subscribe to the Odd Coaches podcast on Apple Music, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Spotify, and YouTube. Follow the Odd Coaches podcast on Twitter and Instagram at Odd Coaches. Follow Dr. Adams on Twitter and Instagram at CKA Save Project. In addition, follow Coach Mike Francis on Twitter and Instagram at Coach Franchise, spelled Coach FRANCHIZE. For more information about the CKA Save Project, please visit them on the web at www.ckasaveproject.org. See you next time on the Odd Coaches podcast.